In this episode of the Stamina Lab podcast, I spoke with Erin Laverone. She's an expert nutrition, health, and fitness coach and co-founder of The Habit Coach Professionals, which is training coaches on the science of behavior change. In this episode, we talk about how to approach behavior change and some of the tools she uses to train coaches on change, both for their clients and for themselves. We also talk about how to apply behavior change to improve your nutrition, which I found enlightening and helpful. So I know you'll get a lot out of this conversation. Let's get started. Hi, Erin. Thank you for joining us on the podcast.
For sure. Thank you for having me. It's nice to be in the AC room, escaping the Texas heat that's now amid us.
Exactly. So you have every single problem every single behavior is a solution to a problem. Mm-hmm. So even bad behaviors. Mm-hmm. That's something you have wrote and said. I think I read.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so if we think about behavior, there are tons of behaviors that we do every day. And especially if they're repeated behaviors, which much of them are, they often have three things in common. And this comes from behavioral analysis, so the ABC model, which stands, the A is a fancy word, antecedent. And so that really just means like a trigger, a prompt, a cue, something in our environment, whether that's internal, external, that is getting us to take action to do this behavior. The B in that is really easy. It's a behavior. It's the action we take. And then the C is the consequence of that behavior. And people often look at consequence as something negative, but it's really not something necessarily negative. It could be positive or negative, and it can be immediate or delayed. And so what I mean with your question is every behavior solves a problem is we're usually looking at like, why did we do something, right? And so we have been prompted or cued in our environment, triggered to do this behavior because we have some experience in this environment, and then the behavior we do has provided some type of immediate positive, like rewarding experience. So the reason we maybe do something that looks at, and I don't really like to use bad behavior, but a behavior is that in some way, due to our ability, due to our experience, due to the quote unquote like reward or positiveness of it, that behavior has provided an immediate solution to like some type of need, want, fear, pain, uncomfortable feeling. And so we often frame it as like bad because it's not like good for our like long-term or productive for our long-term goals, especially if we're thinking like a coaching setting. Yeah. We're often here to help clients, reach their long-term goals, which often requires some trade-offs, but we have millennia of evolution behind us where we're wired for that immediate gratification. So based on experiences, we're doing this behavior that is immediately rewarding in some way to kind of get rid of some type of discomfort or problem. So that's often why even the behavior in the moment, it is a good solution because it's based on the experiences they have, and it's immediately getting rid of kind of that discomfort or negative whatever that's going around.
So there's not a bad habit.
I mean, it could be. I like to, that's how it's framed often in pop sci. I don't really like to look at it. I like to look at it more as like an unproductive habit. So how can, really as coaches especially.
Unproductive, okay, I like that.
As coaches especially, I think we should be more looking at it as like, why is this person doing this behavior? So what are they trying to solve, really, is a better question. And then why do they think, and they may not even thought about this, why do they think, or why have they chosen this as a good solution? And so if we can start to dig into what the problem is and why this has been chosen as a solution, we can then maybe start to come up with a more productive way that still, they have the ability to do it, they have some experience and, the self-efficacy to do it, but it also provides in some ways, hopefully, a rewarding experience in some manner. It might not be super rewarding, but also is in line with like their long-term goals, is more productive for the long term.
Do you need to know why they're doing it, or can you just build a new behavior?
So I would say if you don't know why, you're just like, what's the term, like throwing darts blindly. Like you might have read like Atomic Habits is an amazing pop sci book on all this, right? And it gives you a lot of strategies to use, and you can take those strategies, throw them out there, see if they work, and if they work, fabulous. Like, I have nothing wrong with that. But a lot of times they'll stick for a while, life will happen, something will come up, you'll be triggered by this thing you haven't become aware of again, and you'll default back to the old habits, the quote-unquote bad habits. And so we really need to dig in and understand why and what is the problem we're solving, so that, especially if I'm in a coaching situation and someone is hiring me, I can more efficiently and effectively help them solve their problem, rather than just keep throwing things at the wall. And
right, so it's more efficient.
Right.
More efficient, yeah, because the trigger, what it's called, the antecedent in the ABC model. Antecedent is you're not actually aware of what the actual antecedent is, and so you're creating new behavior, but the antecedent can come back.
Right, yeah. And so we want to try to
situations.
build awareness. Sometimes we might be aware of it, sometimes we're not. And we can also build in potentially better antecedents to actually trigger like the behavior that we are looking to do that's more productive and in line with our long-term goals.
And you talked about in that example, you were saying like something like life will happen, but I also think too, and one of the things I see is when you get later in the day, you're running out of that willpower or that you're perhaps using to build that new behavior or trying to make the right decisions. And so there's some fatigue that happens during the day. So that's similar to life happening, like a stressful situation. You're running out of willpower a bit, and good night of sleep always helps that. So how do you view sleep and willpower in the behavior change process?
I would say that generally, like, willpower is often like a very broad and kind of ill-defined term. If we're looking at it from like a behavioral science and analysis perspective, what it really is our ability to like repeatedly make decisions and then probably some calculations on those decisions as well. So really, is it like oftentimes at the end of the day it's like willpower that's running out? Because there was a bunch of research done in like the early 2000s, 2015 on willpower, often referred to as like ego depletion, and that sense is like not really replicated and in some ways been refuted, because willpower actually is more like it ebbs and flows. It's kind of like motivation and whatnot. So it's not that it can be like depleted at the end of the day. We've gone through that willpower as a resource, but it's more like, are we talking actually about like our energy levels, which are more affected by like sleep, eating well, exercising, that are affecting, maybe the choices we make. More current research actually shows that those who have the highest willpower actually never use it. And it's because they've learned to manage their internal triggers, and they've set up their environment so that there aren't the external triggers there to help them make bad decisions. Rather, it's set up so that the healthy choice, the choice we want to make, the productive choice for our long-term goals, is the easy kind of default choice to do. So they're not really actually using their willpower. So as far as sleep goes, like, I would say it's not that like your willpower has gone down versus like maybe your energy's low, maybe there's things in your environment that you haven't like addressed that are triggering, or there's internal like feelings of boredom or that low energy that are triggering potentially like bad decisions, rather than like our willpower has depleted at the end of the day.
So no, I like that. That's interesting, the energy part of it. I mean, obviously that's a big interest of in working in sleep, what I do, and wanting to how to manage your energy throughout the day. When you're working nutrition, obviously that's a huge part of it, managing your energy. Choosing sleep and nutrition both together, so you're never actually getting into the willpower category, is what you're telling me, right?
Yeah, so ideally, like I said, those who have the strongest willpower don't really like use it. So what we're actually really getting into is, how do I help my client, if I'm coaching them, or if it's myself, if I find myself falling short on things, how do I help my client actually set up their environment? Their external environment is usually the easiest to attack first, so that those triggers aren't there for them to fall for when like their energy levels are low or they're in like a poor mental state. But then there is also like a very big factor in that it's a little bit harder, it takes a little longer, and sometimes you have to bring on your allied health professionals like a psychologist or whatnot, but it's to manage those internal triggers as well, those feelings of boredom, low energy, depression, anxiety, whatnot, that might also trigger us to do those unwanted, quote-unquote, bad behaviors.
Right. The environment, though, is so powerful to set up.
Super powerful.
Yeah, and the people around you too as well. Having the right people in your life.
Well, that's part of our environment. When we're looking at environment with our clients, we're looking at various aspects. So built environment is one, so like their home space, their workspace, whatever their third space is. Social environment, huge. again, can be hard to tackle. Like those relationships we need to navigate, might have to bring someone else on to help with that. But also like our digital environments, our mental environments, our physical like being. Are we taking care of ourselves physically? So there are a variety of different things that we're thinking about in environment. It's not just like the built space around us.
Okay, that's a very clear distinction.
Yeah.
My immediate thought was just the physical environment around you, but the people is part of that environment.
Right. Yeah. For sure.
And the so there's many times where I've been with people where the family especially has been a triggering ordeal for someone 100%. That just spins them out for a while. And
it's always the kids' food, right? The nutrition. No, I'm kidding.
Exactly.
Sort of kidding.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean that's part of it. If you have to use willpower, you're using it like really strategic. Like, okay, I'm at the grocery store. I just need to make that one decision to not bring that whatever home. So then
don't go to the grocery store when you're starving.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. But then not to have like to grab the chips or grab the things that you don't want to have in your environment for later when you are tired.
For sure. I mean, for me, like, I will not walk down the cereal aisle.
Cereal's
that's so good and tasty. I can eat a box, like, sitting down, and I love it, so I just, like, will not go down the cereal.
Yeah.
Once a year, I'll go down, I'll get a box of Cinnamon Toast Crunch, like, around my birthday.
That's good to do. I mean, I think that's important to stay to, too, right, is you don't need to be 100% perfect.
Right.
100% of the time.
Sure. And sometimes that'll even mess you up more if you're thinking about the fact that, like, I need to be perfect.
Right.
One of the things we talk about, too, like, streaks can be a big thing in behavioral science for good or for bad.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes they're good. You're like, I'm 7 days, I can keep going. But then if you, like, break that really long streak, it's like, well, forget it.
What the hell?
Totally off.
What the hell might as well.
What the hell effect. We call it other things I can't probably say on the air. But, if that does happen, one thing we discuss with our clients is, like, just never miss twice. And also, like, don't let it just roll by. Like, learn from it. So, like, if that happened, like, what were the things that led to that happening? Were you tired? Were you hungry when you went grocery shopping? Did you not pre-prep your food? Or if we're talking in the nutrition realm, like,
right.
So that we can actually use that as a learning experience to then start experimenting on from there in the future. Yeah,
that's something we say a lot, is an experimenter's mindset to have. Yeah, I mean, each time you do something differently, it's like, it's just another learning to be able to take back and experiment again. I'm like, okay, I hadn't planned for that scenario.
Right, 100%. Yeah.
And so how do I not beat yourself up from it?
So in one of the courses we teach, we have 3 main tools, but in addition to those tools, we fully tell our coaches, like, one of the biggest things you should have going into your coaching and your own habit practices and whatnot is that, like, an experimentation mindset is crucial.
Yeah.
So we're always learning. Every piece of data is a good piece of data, whether we like what the data tells us or not, that we can adapt and iterate from.
And that is an antidote to that perfectionist and what the hell effect.
Exactly.
So you've had now Habit Coach Pro go through 100?
Yeah, right around 100.
100 coaches.
We're in the middle of
what kind of coaches?
They're fitness, nutrition, health, wellness, predominantly. We've had some, like, leadership, life, career coaches go through it as well, but we're primarily targeting those in the nutrition, health, wellness, fitness space.
So what has surprised you the most about how coaches are approaching behavior change? I guess before they come in, and then obviously then after.
Yeah, I mean, before, and I don't think it's to, like, any fault of their own, it's really kind of where the industry was, and that this is now, like, a... habits are everywhere. You read them in the New York Times, they're pop sci books and whatnot. I finally made kind of my big career switch after reading the pop sci book Atomic Habits, because I was like, this stuff is really getting out there in front of the public now. If someone doesn't start teaching this to coaches who have this amazing privilege to change people's lives, then, like, we're going to be in big trouble. Like, someone's got to do it. So what surprised me before is, like, in our continuing education, primary continuing education, I speak mainly from a personal trainer perspective because that's where I started. I don't know how many years, 2008. How many years ago was that? 15 years ago?
Nice.
Yikes. Is like we got oftentimes, I don't even think in my first certification there was anything on behavior change. There might have been. But as I took more and more certifications and courses, it was often left to be like the last chapter in a textbook, and it would often be on like trans-theoretical model of change, stages of change, which is fine, but really doesn't provide you as a coach a way to assess behavior in the first place, but 2, like actual strategies to put forward in an efficient manner, let alone, a person if you're trying to figure it out yourself. So I think as coaches, and this was me too, I don't fault this like you said, but what would surprise me is like, we've got all this education and assessment tools and fitness or nutrition and whatnot that we're like very, I wouldn't say rigid about, but we have a process, right? Versus like when it came to behavior change, it's like, oh, we'd read this book and we read that book and there's like, oh, there's a good strategy. So let's pluck that, try it, throw it at the wall and hope it sticks. And if it does, like earlier I said, great. But if not, then it's like, oh crap. Like now you kind of have a little of that cognitive dissonance as a coach because you're not really getting the results and seeing the things you want to see. So I think in some ways that surprised me, but it doesn't because that's all we had available. Versus now when people come through our program, the first 3 weeks of the program, they're primarily just learning about behavioral science in general. How do we make decisions? What makes a behavior happen? How do behaviors turn into habits in the first place? What are the various cognitive biases and whatnot that, are potentially blinding us to doing the things we want to do? But the biggest cornerstone of our course that I think completely changes coaches, not only like how they coach, but their personal lives as well, is actually providing them with these 3 tools we've created to assess behavior in the first place. So we're going through a whole habit loop and seeing like, what's activating the behavior? Do the clients or themselves have the ability to do the behavior in the first place, whether that's perceived ability or actual ability? Are they getting some type of positive immediate consequence in doing this behavior? Is their environment set up in such a way that it can allow repetition of this behavior to happen, because that's how a behavior turns into a habit, is it has to be done over and over and over, ideally in the same context. The closer the context is, the more likely it is continued to be repeated, whether for good or for worse.
Right.
So I think one of the surprising things is that like people are just like mind blown by the like how intricate behavior really is, rather than just thinking of it like, oh, it's just this action that we do. There's so much behind it that goes into making that behavior happen in the first place and then to repeating it. And so that's why we don't want to necessarily, especially if someone's paying us to help them, just throw strategies at the wall, because we might be throwing a strategy that maybe is going to affect like the antecedent, the trigger, the prompt, the cue, when really we should be looking at like their ability or the environment, something like that.
Right. And the well, first of all, like you said, you have the privilege to help people with change. I think that's wonderful and beautiful and true. The note you said before, though, you said most of the time they come through training, the basis they have is the trans theoretical model. Mm-hmm. For the listeners, can you describe that a little bit? Because I also noted too, and I have worked with coaches that have just done some basic behavior training and think, I've got behavior training, and they just that's all they had, and they tell me where people are on that thing, like, all right, well then what?
For sure. You might have to help me go. I think there's 5 stages if I remember right. It's been a while since I've actually looked at it, but it's like pre-contemplation, contemplation, I think action. There's like a 4th one, and then there's potential like relapse. I'm blanking on
maintenance. I think maintenance.
Maintenance. Yeah, there we go. So basically it's just like, where are we at headspace wise mainly, but also like our ability, which might be like time, money, resources, to be able to actually make a change. So pre-contemplation, we're really just like thinking about it. We have no real idea to take action now or in the future. And then contemplation, we're getting closer to taking action. Maybe we were thinking about like planning out a schedule or whatnot. We're thinking about the resources we might have, money-wise, or if it's like, if it's some type of coaching we need to hire, or some type of like equipment we need to have to do it.
I like even that in that stage. My partner, Dr. Deborah Tubler, she always likes to show one, like, you just even driving by the fitness store,
right.
Like I'm just driving by it. Maybe I drove a couple blocks out of my way. I haven't gone into it yet, but that's would be the pre-contemplation. I mean, in contemplation. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then you get into the action phase where you're actually starting to do the thing.
Yeah.
And hopefully thinking about and experimenting around like what's actually allowing you to be successful in that phase. But
it is. I think that is helpful for a lot of people just to understand where they are in that place. I'm like, it's okay to be in either one of those stages, and you're for various habits you could be in different, or various behaviors you can be in different stages of the. And I think for a long time I was in pre-contemplation over my pizza, love of pizza. So I'm like, no way, no how am I giving up pizza. I'm like, it's too good, and I like it. So, but I've since I've since curbed it down to.
I was like, hopefully not forever. It's one of the
no, I love it. No, and I think that goes back to the thing too, as well as if something you love, you can still can have it.
100%.
Yeah, and it's like your cereal you have for your birthday treat. So yeah, no, I think it's important to know that you don't have to be 100% perfect. I can still have it and I can still enjoy it, but you can't have it 4 nights a week.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, you could. It depends what your long-term goals are.
Exactly. Well, I mean, and then that one for me, part of it came around the more you start doing other habits around it. So the more my diet got more clean. Clean, I guess is not the right word, but the more fresh foods I was putting into my body, unprocessed foods. The cleaner my machines felt like it was running.
Right.
So when I would have the pizza, I could definitely notice the difference.
Sure.
And I'm like, oh, this is really gunking up the works here.
Right.
And giving me energy crash, afterwards. So I was like, all right, I like that feeling more than I like the small immediate gratification of the pizza.
And you probably noticed like other habits getting better that were more in line with what you wanted to do or be when you were eating better as well.
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
So what they actually call that in behavioral science is like a keystone habit.
Yeah.
So it's one of those big habits that like if this one's in place, it actually makes a whole lot of others fall in line. And so it's kind of like this good momentum.
Yeah, that's why I love sleep, because I think when you're working on your sleep habit to try to get to sleep and get a good night of sleep or get your 7 hours of sleep, whatever time it makes right for you to go to bed. But when you're working on that, you're working on all the other rest of the things that happen during your day, and then they also impact everything that you also have in your day, your energy levels and your decisions and whatnot. Because obviously I know when I do not get a good night's sleep, some of the, then obviously my body's craving sugar or carbs or something like that to make up for the perceived lack of fuel, energy that it has.
Right.
And so, but now even knowing that, I'm like, okay, and I didn't get a good night's sleep last night, and I know what this feeling is.
Yeah,
and I know.
You still do it right.
Nice. But
like, my dog got me up at like 3 a.m. the other day, and the rest of the day was not super awesome.
but even also though, it's also managing. I'm like, okay, so it's craving this. I'm like, where can I get a little taste of that to try to mitigate that, and not go like full more down.
Exactly,
like
for sure.
Yeah. Nutrition's interesting and it's and so unique for everybody and hard to.
It's very multifaceted.
It's so hard. It's so
much
hard.
Emotion and culture and wrapped up into it.
Yeah, and also as I am increasing my exercise activity when I moved to Austin. This is just an amazing city for activity.
Yes.
I was sore all the time, and my trainer, who I'm fortunate enough to have help with my work, he was like, you're not eating enough protein. You need to eat. You just need to eat more. Because I had built a fasting schedule and was doing less, and so I'm like, oh. So you constantly have to tweak and look at the different external things that are happening for that environment. I don't know. Is eating before a workout? What's your thought before a workout in the morning? Did you eat?
Oh, it really depends on the time.
Yeah.
If I'm like working out 8:30 a.m. or earlier these days, I'm probably not going to eat.
Right.
That's just personal like preference, because I don't want it like sitting there and it's just like I'm not hungry that early.
Yeah.
I used to be someone that would like jump out of bed at 5 a.m. and have eaten a bowl of oatmeal before 6 a.m.
Okay.
But I've just played a lot with like my eating schedule, and I actually find that throughout the day my energy levels, my hunger levels are better if I actually wait till like 9:30 to eat my first meal. I usually have drinking like probably more than 16 hours of water and 2 cups of tea by then. So a lot of the times, like sometimes hunger we're feeling is actually like thirst, and when it's disguised as hunger. So if you drink, fluids first, water, some tea, that can help rehydrate you. And some of those like what we appear to be hunger signals in the morning might actually have been thirst signals, because we've just gone hopefully 8 hours without any hydration, right? Right. So yeah, if it's really early, although I don't have the privilege, unfortunately, anymore of exercising early that often, because I'm often with clients in the morning, which is great. I'm grateful for them. But like my ideal workout time would be like these days probably like 7 a.m. And so in that case, I like probably wouldn't eat till after. Right. If I'm starving, like for some reason I'm hungry, I didn't eat
enough last night.
The night before, I'll allow myself to eat.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then that's interesting what you said though. You had to continue experimenting.
Yeah.
We go back to the experimenter's mindset. You gotta keep experimenting with this things. Have you noticed over time having to change that as your schedule changed, or maybe metabolism has changed? I don't know.
For sure, I would say my metabolism, thank God, hasn't really changed too much yet. But I think I'm lucky in that like I do run my own business, so I have quite a bit of flexibility in my schedule to be able to play with that most of the time. Some days I don't. Tuesdays and Thursdays I'm packed with clients, and I usually have to eat like a bar or something on the road just because I have them like one after the other. And I don't want to eat like a meal at 6 a.m. before I leave.
Right.
But I played with it a lot. My graduate school, probably up until I finished graduate school, which was in 2014, like I said, I'd get up at 5 a.m. and I'd have a bowl of oatmeal before 6 a.m. But when I found like that, I was eating more throughout the day because like that oatmeal that I would eat wouldn't really satiate me. And then like I experimented a lot. At that time I was also doing Precision Nutrition's level 1 and level 2 certification, so I learned a lot then, but then I was also like forced, because of the way the certification set up, is to experiment a lot on myself then. And so I just found that if I delayed a little bit, and actually I really probably wasn't hungry, I was kind of not eating due to hunger signals in the morning. It was more just like routine. I got up, I got ready, I ate, and I was out the door by like 6:15. So I really wasn't tuning into my own hunger signals. And so, but then by eating that early, then that kicked my hunger signals into going. So, an hour and a half later, I was hungry again for another meal. Versus now, I just drink lots of water and I usually have 2 cups of tea till about 9:30 a.m. And then my favorite breakfast is 2 over medium eggs with avocado toast and a piece of fruit. So like that sits pretty well with me for 2 or 3 hours, and then I don't have to eat like a snack again until, like noon or something. I'll have like something small because I usually have like a lunchtime call. And then I'll have like a later lunch at like 1:30 too.
So do you do meal prep?
I try to.
Yeah.
It's been a little hectic the last couple of weeks, but I did meal prep this weekend.
Right. Yeah. So meal prep is part of the behavior design.
For sure.
Yeah. And when you do meal prep, your weeks go better?
100%.
Yeah.
It's like if I didn't get my meal prep done on Sunday, I'm already stressed out for the week. Because like I get like an hour and 15 minutes for lunch most days, and that's not enough. Like most of my lunches, I eat a hot meal. I don't really eat a sandwich. And so if I have to cook on my lunch break, then that kind of throws everything off if I even have time. So typically, if things are set up right and I didn't have a hectic weekend and I left half a Sunday to do things that I need to do for me,
right,
I'm prepping 2 meals, and I don't mind eating the same thing over and
sure,
over. So I'll eat the same thing for like lunch and dinner. I'll
sure,
cook 4 or 5 portions of the same 2 meals. And then I love my breakfast. I could eat that probably for all 3 meals every day if I wanted to. So that makes everything smoother. I probably eat out once or twice a week during the week.
Yeah.
And so
variety.
I allow that to be put in there where needed.
Get some variety for your brain. But I think that's interesting too, is do you having the same meal over and over, I think obviously makes it easy for production of your meal prep. And then do you like change it out like seasonally or something like that?
Yeah, I mean like this time of year it's so hot in Austin, I actually lose my appetite compared to normal, even if I'm working out still consistently, just because of the heat. So it's like I do a lot more salads this time of year versus the rest of the year. I actually prefer most of my vegetables to be cooked. Like love roasted vegetables, sauteed, stir fries. But like I don't want anything hot, and it's actually I have to almost force myself to eat protein in the summer because most of my protein I get from meat sources, eggs, and like Greek yogurt. But in the summer, like I really don't want, even if the meat's cold, like you chop it up and you put like grilled chicken, like it's just something about the texture and the heaviness of it in the heat. Like I don't like it as much as I do when it's not hot. So I end up having to kind of like force myself if I know like I really do need this amount of protein, or going more towards like yogurts with fruits or like whey protein smoothies to try to get that in, because it's just hard to eat when it's hot.
Yeah. So with your clients then, that's one of the early places you start is in meal prep?
Like coaching my clients?
Yeah.
The first place I started was just general personal training.
Right.
And then this will just give you a little bit of background of how I came to where I am. But I started in personal training, ended up getting a bachelor's and master's in exercise physiology, learning everything I could about exercise, but realized that even if I was like lucky enough to see a client 3 or 4 times a week, they still had 160 something hours to do with their week what they wanted. And so I wasn't, for me personally, felt like I was making enough difference in their lives just with exercise alone. So my next step was to study nutrition. And I never did meal plans. I actually took Precision Nutrition's level 1 and level 2 master certification. And they're more based, and this is kind of where I started to deep dive into the habits, more based on like building healthy nutrition habits. So instead of thinking like I'm going to have this macro planned meal plan, I'm going to think about like, can I get in like a handful of vegetables with every meal? Can I get in like a palm's worth of protein with each meal? And focusing more on like the habits in like general amounts, and then also like the skills that those habits need. So like food prep as a skill. How do we like, do you know how to like cook in the first place? Do you know your knife skills? Like, so sometimes those are things I have to like I don't personally, I couldn't teach knife skills to a client, but I'm like, here's some good resources to look at, or like
YouTube would be great.
Do you have like Tupperware to, put this out?
Right.
Do you have time set aside on Sunday? What types of vegetables do you like? Is there any vegetables you like? Please.
Yeah.
If not, like, how do we compensate for that or work around that? Or maybe it's that like you think you don't like vegetables, but really you've never figured out how to prepare them well in a way that's tasty. Because I personally myself used to hate vegetables. As a kid, I ate iceberg lettuce and baby carrots, and that was it.
Right. My mom and sister laugh at me too as well, because now they see my nutrition. They're like, you couldn't make me eat that when I was younger. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So you think that the basic stuff for nutrition is really like most people need to get across that chasm versus getting into meal planning around.
You're coming up to a question in my head that I often discuss with people, but in college you take a lot of courses that I feel like you never use again just because you have to check these boxes to quote unquote be well-rounded. And I'm like, every single human being should, one, take a nutrition course, and two, take a cooking course.
Yeah.
Like, why is that not in our college curriculum or whatever it is? Or even high school curriculum, because we
used to have home economics, but I don't think they do that anymore, do they?
It wasn't even when I was in high school. My mom used to tell me about that, though. But, like, that's so vital. I can't tell you how many times I've had a client come to me, they're like 43, and they're like, I don't know how to cook. I'm like, how are you alive?
Right.
Like, in these days, like, it's way easier, right? Because you can just go on YouTube, or I don't use TikTok, but I think TikTok, I had a roommate making a recipe off TikTok, and they step by step, and you can these days find a lot of things that take very little time, taste well, and are decent for you calorie and nutrition wise.
And also there's I think it's interesting. I mean, I do it every once in a while, but the meal delivery services that deliver you stuff with all the ingredients and to go. Because one thing I think you learn real quick is cooking is really just following instructions going down the list, and so they just make it all. They just put it right there, so it's again making the behavior easier.
Unlike baking, whole nother story.
Yeah. But just putting everything right, making it again from behavior design, making it super easy for you to be able to cook.
Sure.
Your food.
And sometimes that's one of the strategies we take with their clients. Like, maybe they don't even have the time to learn how to cook, so they'll either get, like you said, where it has the recipe that you can make, or even the pre-prepped ones.
Yeah.
Because that's even one step better than eating out, right? Like, there are some, I don't think they're here anymore, but when I was in grad school, there used to be a place called, like, My Fit Foods, and they would have, like, the same type of meal, like, say it was, like, some type of, like, ground turkey, quinoa veggie dish, like, but it'd be, like, different sizes relative, not like small, medium, large, but relative like to what macros you wanted to hit or whatnot, the portions and ratios and whatnot. I think the Snap Kitchen still exists here. I'm not sure, but
I'm sure. Yeah,
there's different services like that around here that will actually have them pre-portioned out relative to kind of your goals.
Now, the pushback I get, which I would say was the same thing for all of us, is that I don't have time for meal prep. How do you address that when your clients say that, or do they?
Oh, that's a whole rabbit hole. One of the things that I think is a very important skill to learn, and it's a strategy we teach in our course to our coaches, and that sometimes even our coaches need to do, because if it might be that like our client says they might not have time to meal prep, or a coach is saying they don't have time for something else that might be quote unquote important.
Sure.
And so one of the biggest barriers when we're going through a course and setting people up to kind of experiment, we're assessing them, we're looking at potential barriers within the habit loop. And one, if not the most common barrier, is time, whatever that's for. So if it's time for meal prep, one of the skills we have our coaches learn and then help teach their clients is actually like assessing their time. It's very easy to say, I don't have time, but do we really not have time? And so depending on, and oftentimes there's resistance, I had resistance to it when I first learned the skill, but it's thinking about doing a time audit and trying to keep track as close as you can. Obviously, the more nitty-gritty you can get, the more accurate your picture will be of where we are using blocks of time throughout our day. So literally creating like a journal. Like if I scheduled let's say for me personally, like 2 to 4 p.m., I want to write X article. And that's in my calendar, and I'm writing it. But really, was I writing from 2 to 4 p.m., or was I writing from like 2 to 2:30, and then like a ding or ping went off, and I got distracted on my phone for 15 minutes, and now 2:30 to 2:50 or 2:45, I wasn't writing. I get back to writing, and then something else happens. My old dog had an accident, and I've got to go clean up after them, so there goes another 20 minutes. And so what I find is, like, even though I said I was writing and going to write for this 2-hour block of time, I really was only writing for an hour and 20 minutes. So suddenly what I noticed by doing this kind of audit of my time, this journal of my time, is that there's 40 minutes of time there I actually do have. Maybe I couldn't prevent the cleaning up the dog accident, but I could have gotten back that 15 minutes of distraction from the ding and ping on my phone that I got carried away with. So we will have them audit their time, and you never want to approach it in that like you're calling the client a liar that they don't have time. And you probably want to build a little bit of a relationship with them before you start doing something like this. But opening them up to the idea of really looking at, where are we using our time? Are we watching TV? Is that productive towards our goals? It may or may not be. I'm not going to judge you, but
sure.
Like, how much time are we spending there? How much time are we spending on social media? How much time are we spending on email? These things that often we allow to take up more time, or we're triggered to take up more time than they really need to, and then we say we don't have time for things.
Yeah, I also find it useful to try to pair with something else you're already doing. So if I'm already watching a TV show, then perhaps I can, especially if it's a TV show you don't really have to pay attention to. Like, it's not like an intense show, like a Survivor type game show or a reality show, or even a podcast. Mm-hmm. If I have a favorite podcast, I'm like, all right, well, I can listen to that, but I have to do it during meal prep.
Right.
So therefore, I get the enjoyment of the show.
For sure. You're using a little behavioral science.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what that's called from a behavioral science perspective?
I don't know, pairing it.
Temptation bundling.
Temptation bundling.
So, but the key would be, like, to really make it impactful is to make a pact with yourself to where, like, I cannot watch this specific podcast or this show unless I am doing this behavior. And that is actually a way too that, like I said, in order for a behavior to be repeated, it has in some way be rewarding. And oftentimes the things that are like good for us, you know, in the long term, aren't very rewarding in the moment. So we have to actually create these strategies to make them initially externally rewarding or extrinsically rewarding, so that in the hopes they eventually become kind of part of our identity and routine, and then they become intrinsically rewarding. So
right,
yeah.
Well, in some cases, the meal prep it's a chore. So
For some people, it might always be.
I might need to have that external, extrinsic reward the whole time.
One of the biggest things when I was early on learning about behavioral science before I created Habit Coach Pro with my partner, is that I kind of looked down. Like, I was always someone who people often said, without really understanding the term, they're like, oh, Erin, you have really good willpower, or like, you know how to like get things done even if they're like unpleasant for your long-term goals and whatnot. And what I realized after is that made me oftentimes look down on people who like gave into immediate gratification. And I thought they were like weak or unmotivated and whatnot. And now, like, I don't think that at all. In fact, what I figured out once I started to understand behavior is that we are wired, this is millennia of evolution, for immediate gratification. Why are we going to fight that?
Right.
Why not use it to our advantage? It's not a bad thing. Let's figure out how to actually use it for our productive long-term goals, because our unconscious brain, system 1 brain, is not thinking about that long-term in the split-second moment that we have to make this decision. But how do I actually like bring a little awareness to that and harness that so that I can use it to my advantage rather than let it control me and send me in the direction I don't want to go?
I think every behavior solves a problem. So yeah,
exactly.
That's using it. And then the other thing part about is I was say that now when I watch TV now, because I've wired so much of this is unproductive time, or I use this time differently. I have my foam roller by my television, so I'm like, all right, well, you're watching TV, so you have to stretch, or you're watching TV, so you have to fold laundry. The action of watching the TV is now hardwired to find something else to do during that time period that is working on making me feel better. So
yeah,
it's not saying I have to do the activity for that, but it's reverse the same thing, but the same.
And another thing about that, we're working with a researcher out of Stanford, near IAL, to create another course that'll be coming out real soon. But to talk about that is we often think like what you're doing, pairing the TV with the stretching or meal prep or whatever it is fantastic. But we might also think about like, instead of just always looking down on TV, like that could be a good thing if we are planning for it. So I don't know if you've heard of Nir Eyal's book, Indistractable.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so if we were actually planning to watch TV and we're fitting that in and we're not just like letting it subconsciously happen and distract us from the things we need and want to do, then like it can be good. But it's when we don't plan for it and we let it kind of overtake the time of other things we should do that it can be unproductive.
Right. Oh yeah, for sure. A Sunday night when Succession was on, I definitely said okay, because plus those kind of shows too. Those ones would require you to be involved in the show.
Right,
You can't.
yeah.
It's hard
Exactly.
to do something else. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's usually pairing it, like I said, with something that is guilty pleasure. You said about when you talk about your coaches, they're actually we talk about your coaches. They were actually doing the work themselves because they also have not have time for something there. So how has it helped them personally, and what surprises have you heard when they go through the program that they've like aha moments that they've said for themselves?
Yeah.
It's always interesting, as a coach to myself or in general when you're doing this. Yes, it's great when you're learning that, and they're teaching the people you're coaching these behaviors. But as a professional doing this work, when it surprises you yourself, that's always a really interesting piece. Yeah,
For sure. I think the biggest thing is like when we as coaches often go into continuing education, we are in some way looking to improve our skill set to help our clients. And so we have actually intentionally built this in, but we like sneakily slide it in and don't like say this outwardly, because I think sometimes if we were to like pitch in our marketing and whatnot, or how we describe the program, that like we're gonna make you better, like it might come off of like, oh, something's wrong with me, I'm not good enough, like our ego gets in the way, right?
Sure.
So we built that in without telling people, but then it starts to quickly reveal itself, especially when we get to the second part of the course and we start to do the behavioral assessment and do it hands-on, because we actually, in the second part of the course, it's very applied. The first part is just like read, do these interactive lessons, answer some questions, interact in our community hub. But in the second part, they're doing not only like case studies and mock coaching, but they're doing self-coaching. And so the biggest surprise that people realize, and like the biggest like feedback we get, there's two. The first one is that like they're like, oh, I came into this course to be a better coach, but really I'm using this more on myself and becoming better, just a better human in general, whatever it is in my life. Like habits, are in every aspect of our life. So it's not like they're just using it for fitness and nutrition. They're using it in, family life or communication or whatever, business life. So I think that's one of the coolest things, is just to see how these people like open up and how it impacts their personal life. Of course, I wanted it to impact their coaching
Sure.
and to make a better business. That's the main point of it. They're investing a lot of money in our course, and we want them to be able to see that in return. Financial success is important to your overall well-being, but just to see them improve their personal lives as well, and to like surprise upon that when all along we're like, yes, that was one of our main goals and it's happening.
That's awesome.
But you never know if it's really going to happen either. Like, especially when we first beta tested this. And of course I knew this was going to happen. I was going to say the second thing. Oh, yes, the second thing. I should never say how many things, because if you forget, you're screwed. But the second thing is like at the end, so we get a little meta on ourselves. And that was intentional as well. So when we were creating this course, not only did we want to like teach people and give them the knowledge and skills, but continuing education, at least in our field, but I think in a lot of our field, is not behavioral science friendly. It is boring and monotonous.
Yeah.
And like you spend all this time and money, and you maybe, which is great, get like one golden nugget that you like use forever onward and changes your life. Fantastic if it's one. But like I don't want to spend 3 months, 6 months, a year, which most of these programs are, and hundreds of pages and thousands of dollars, only to get one little thing out of. And so before we even started the course, we actually interviewed, we meaning mainly me, I kept in touch with trainers, primarily personal trainers, some nutrition coaches as well, over the years from gyms I worked at, conferences I went to, just people I networked with, and we just interviewed tons of them and said, like, not only like what are you missing as far as like behavior change, but when you took continuing education courses, like what did you like and not like about them? And we actually wanted to create this course in a way, so some of the 3 main tenets of behavioral science are make it fun and enjoyable, because it has to be rewarding in some way if it's going to be repeated, right? Make it obvious to do and make it easy to do. And so we wanted to make sure that when we delivered the course, the structure of the course, you know, it was obvious on how to take action, it was easy to take action, and it was fun and enjoyable to take action. And so we actually say you are building a habit, you're building a learning habit while learning about habits in our course. And so the surprising thing that people always comment on is like the course is 10 weeks long. It's 70 days straight where they have to take action for at least 15 to 20 minutes a day, sometimes a little bit more when you're getting into the application period of the course. But like people graduate, we take their exam, and then like the Monday after the exam comes and they're no longer like in the course. And so they don't get this like notification email to do, we call it their daily habit, HAB, like a little bit of habits. We like to play with that stuff and make it fun.
Make it fun.
Like, I didn't get my daily habit, and they're like bummed and surprised. They're like, oh, it was so much fun. Like I missed the program in the course. Versus like I feel like usually when you take some type of course, it's like kind of a relief that it's done, right? So that's the second most surprising thing, is that people like actually miss the learning process and doing the course and interacting with the people in the course. Literally that day after is when they notice it. We often get emails and messages in our community.
That's wonderful.
Yeah,
that's great. Yeah, because it is meta. If you're teaching behavioral science, then and you don't structure it with behavioral science.
The funny thing is, it even happens in behavioral science. I've taken some behavioral science courses. I'm like, this is so boring.
Yeah.
Like
you haven't used your own lessons.
People don't often think about it on that level, but we're like major nerds about it. So.
Totally. Yeah. No. You can't help it not to, because this is what you're teaching. It's hard not to hardwire it in, at least for the work that we try to create and progress we try to do.
It's a blessing and a curse sometimes.
It is a blessing and a curse. It is. I'm like, damn it. Like I was going through a hard period, and I'm like, damn it, I have all the tools to solve this.
I'm like, I
can't.
The awareness of that too. It's like this whole layer. You're sometimes like sitting on your shoulder, like, why?
Yeah, I mean, I can't wallow in this. I know how to get myself out of it. So you were talking about writing, and as sitting there about writing, you're getting distracted from ping on your phone, and a dog coming up or something happening, kids, whatever, all the things that could happen to distract us, and when you want to try to get into that deep work, you're trying to get into flow, and so I wanted to what are some of the enjoyable activities that get you into flow, and then how do you use that to get into flow for your work?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that gets me into flow is mountain biking.
Yeah.
You just can't be anywhere else but what's right in front of you. And like if I'm in a crappy headspace or an unproductive space, like sometimes I have to force myself to do it. I realize that I'm like not getting out and doing it often enough, but that just like completely clears your mind because you can only focus on that which is in front of you. The second thing is like weightlifting. Just put some music on and get going. And sometimes I'm like, how many sets did I do? Good thing I have the little app that like ticks through and whatnot, and I can tell. But not quite as much because I still sometimes can get a little distracted out of that. But those are the two biggest like fun things that get me in the flow. Of course, like something like playing basketball, which I used to do a lot. I just don't get to do enough anymore. I'm getting too old and my body can't handle playing 3 hours a day every day, nor do I have the time. But yeah, a lot of like athletic endeavors in which like doing it well and doing it safely requires you to just be in the moment.
Yeah.
Are probably the biggest things that get me into flow. Funny enough, maybe I should take one of your courses on flow. I've been having a harder time with like enjoyable flow in work. Mm-hmm. I very much time block my schedule, a lot of it based off Nir Eyal's work, and that was profoundly life-changing. It allowed me to go from working or at least feeling like I'm working 7 days a week, to mainly keeping most of my work to Monday through Friday, which can be very challenging as an entrepreneur that works from home. But I will say that when I am able to get into a flow space, and one thing I really want to get into it better with is writing, because I do enjoy writing, but in order to get into that flow of it, I have to have time. like just unencumbered time to be able to do that. And managing 2 businesses right now, as well as some other things, like I'm finding it hard to allow myself to like block off like 3 to 4 hours just to go with wherever the writing takes me specifically. But it is something that I'm like, unfortunately, have the awareness of, that I know it's habits, but what I am realizing is that I am just not allowing it to be a priority right now.
Right.
For better or for worse, it is something that I consciously tell myself I want to be a priority, but am not allowing, like, bandwidth wise it to happen. There's just a lot of to-dos that are calling me. One of the things though, when I am working, in order to stay, I don't know that I would call it flow, but to help me stay like on task so I can stick with these time blocks I've set aside, is like I literally turn off all of the notifications on my phone, and I delete all and any like social media, LinkedIn, everything, so that like I don't even have like the subconscious accident of like thinking I'm gonna go check a date and then like mindlessly ending up on LinkedIn or whatever it might be. And so making sure that like any potential like triggers or distractions are very hard to access, like without consciously going like download,
right.
In which case I'm probably gonna be like, yeah, I shouldn't be doing that. That helps me at least stay on task work-wise, but like that's not flow.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, I think one of the first areas I would first, and you said already that your mornings are for your clients, because that's the first area I would go, is because you're already set for your brainwave wise when you wake up, right, to be closer to getting to a flow state for the brainwaves. So that would be the first way I go for most people, is just like, we'll get up earlier, make it that very first thing you do right in the morning.
Yeah.
You're already doing a lot of obviously great stuff, but and then even putting your phone in the other room so it's out of your sight. So there's I can't remember the study, but even like having if you were at a restaurant and you set your phone on the table, that you get less connected to the people, even though the phone's upside down or anything, but just the presence of it keeps you less connected to the people there. It's pretty interesting.
I actually have literally sitting on my, this is more for sleep at night, they called it a like phone, what do you call it? Sleeping bag type thing?
Yeah. Put your phone to bed.
And it has like a fun little, I don't remember what the quote is on. I just remember it's like 2 words, 2 lines, 2 words each. Something about like, I don't know, putting your phone away and it gets good sleep. I can't remember the slogan they had. And I literally, every night, I mean, I don't actually use my phone really before bed. I put it down and whatnot. But for some reason, I'm just not putting it in there. But I think I need to bring that little thing down to my office, so that it's like out of sight. It's put away.
Yeah.
And then you have to make the like conscious decision to like it's just one more barrier to doing the thing you really don't want to be doing. You have to unsnap the thing, pull it out before you can then even just like walking out of the room, like
make it more difficult.
Yeah,
make
exactly.
it more difficult. Yeah,
adding that friction layer.
Yeah, I have alarms on my phone, ironically, to go up when it goes off in the evening. Like, all right, this is time for the phone to go to bed, and put it away.
I actually get made fun of because mine are set for like 9 p.m. to like, it just says wind down alarm.
Yeah.
And like sometimes I'll be like still out with some people and they'll like
totally
laugh at me and I'm like, they're like, oh, bedtime? I'm like, yeah, almost.
Yep, 100%. Mine's at 8:30 actually. It's even worse. So it happens a lot if we go to dinner. But it also brings up a conversation to talk about. Like this is part of behavior design. Have a antecedent.
Right. Yeah.
So, if we give one piece of advice to help a person support their fitness and health span, what would that be?
So this is probably going to sound self-serving,
Yeah.
but I'm like dead serious about it. Like, hire a coach. If you have the luxury of hiring a coach, absolutely do. They can be life-changing, especially if you find a really good one. If you can't hire a coach, like at the very least, find someone you like, you trust, will give you some type of unbiased, objective like feedback to be an accountability buddy. And you can serve that purpose for them as well, to repay them for what they're doing. But if we kind of have that extra set of eyes that are a little more unbiased and objective than our own, to give us feedback on whatever it is we are trying to make change on, I think that can be so helpful. Plus, we're a social species. We're a herding species. Like, we want to be around people, even if we're introverted. Like, we are better together. So if you have the opportunity to hire a coach, do that. If not, like, get someone on your side that you can do whatever it is you're trying to work on along with them.
And you have a coach?
I do. Yeah, I've had several throughout the years, and oftentimes I'll cycle. So typical year, I actually just got done with a coaching session, so I actually hired a swim coach for 7 months because I didn't like. I was about to say don't like. starting to like now.
Yeah, not yet.
Didn't like swimming and wasn't good at it, but I was training for a triathlon, and it was very motivating to not want to drown.
Right.
So I hired a swim coach, but oftentimes, even throughout the years, I'll hire like a fitness coach, even though I fully know how to program my workouts.
Yeah.
I'll often hire like probably once a year a nutrition coach, even just to get me, recalibrated on par, get out of my own head with things sometimes. And it's just nice, like especially if I'm in like a really hectic work period, just to have someone else telling you what to do, right?
Yeah.
I don't have to think about writing my own workout. Someone else is. I don't have to think about like how I'm going to plan my meals. Someone else is, or whatever it might be. But usually I'm personally, most of the time, hiring a fitness or nutrition coach. This last one was a swim. Every once in a while it might be like some other type of like business coaching as well. I've done a couple from time to time. It really just depends on like what do I feel like. I like to say like we all have to get good at calling our own bullshit, but like we could still get in our own way no matter how much awareness around it we have. So just having that other set of eyes, ears, to provide that feedback on can be so helpful.
Yeah, I think it's important to know that even coaches have coaches.
Oh yeah. And there's the even the therapist has a therapist, right?
Right.
So like we can all use someone else to just get out of our own heads and tell us like it really is, rather than how we think it is and the stories we're making up and whatnot.
Yeah, thank you. That's like a great place to wrap up. If someone wants to connect with you, where do they find you on online?
Yeah, personally, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, even though it's currently deleted on my phone. I intentionally go on there a few times a week. So you can just look up Erin Laverone on LinkedIn, or you can also look up the Habit Coach Professionals. We're at Habit Coach Pro on Instagram. I believe it's like facebook.com/Habit Coach Pro if you want to go on there. That's the one we're least active on, though. And then we also have a page on LinkedIn for Habit Coach Professionals as well.
Excellent. Well, I'll obviously put all that in the show notes.
Awesome.
All right, Erin, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Glenn. I appreciate it.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. Welcome to the newest episode of Stamina Lab, hosted by me, Glenn Lubert. If you're ready to upgrade your performance, achieve mental clarity, and improve your well-being, well, then you're in the right place. You'll hear the stories of professionals who have taken on big challenges while managing their energy and longevity through the ups and downs of pursuing their goals. Enjoy this episode, then head to the show notes to learn more so you can take the next steps to build the habits and systems you need to achieve your dreams.